Hi, today you're going to be learning how to solve quadratic equations by quadratic formulas. So this is our third method of solving quadratic equations algebraically. Recall that the factoring method only works if it can factor. And quite frankly, not all quadratic equations out there in the real world can factor. So the completing the square method was a second algebraic approach you learn. And the completing the square method always works. However, if you have a front number to x squared, you may be working with fractions in that process, which gets a little tedious. The quadratic formula approach works nicely for any type of quadratic formula, and you don't have to worry about working so much with fractions and squaring fractions. So this approach you may find you like the best. It always works. But before we learn it, I'll go back to the factoring method. Recall that if you want to solve a quadratic equation by factoring in example 1, method 1, you would factor, and this is a trinomial that begins with 1. That's our really nice case where all I have to do is figure out what multiplies to negative 16 and adds up to 6. And it's negative 2 and 8. So then I factor. I set each factor equal to 0 and then solve those. Okay, now the formula. The formula is off to the right, and I'll highlight it. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And where the numbers are coming or where the letters are coming from is if you go to the quadratic, that is your standard form of a quadratic. The a in the formula is the number in front of x squared. The b in the formula is always the number in front of x. And the c in the formula is the number without the x. And I'm going to sing a song because if you can put things to song, it helps you to remember things better. So there's a song that you can sing to help you remember the quadratic formula, and it goes to the tune of Pop Goes the Weasel. So here it goes, and I will point to it as I sing it. X equals negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So that is a little quirky song, but at least it'll help you to remember it, and it'll get stuck in your head, and then you won't forget about it ever again. Okay, so if we're going to do the same problem by the quadratic formula, I would first suggest that you write down what the actual a, b's, and c's are. Even though they're in front of your face, it's really helpful to write them down. Also, please note, it has to be in equals 0 form in order for you to use the formula. So the a is the number in front of x squared, which there's a 1 there. The b is the number in front of x, which is 6. And the c is the number without the x. Also, don't forget that the sign in front of the number, the negative 16, goes with that number. So those are your values. Now, I would also suggest that you write the formula each and every time, especially now since you don't know it. This will help you to remember it. You do not get this formula on the regents. So x equals negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so if I highlight, we are going to put the a number in anywhere you see an a in the formula. You are going to put the b number in anywhere you see the b in the formula. And then lastly, the c anywhere you see the c in the formula. All right, so those are all my colors. Now I'm going to fill in. Now this is if I take the slow approach, what it would look like. It's going to be negative of the b number, which is 6, plus or minus. Then it's going to be the b number, 6 and squared, minus 4 times the a number, which is 1, times the b number, which is, or sorry, c number, which is negative 16. All of that over 2 times a, which is 1. All right, now I'm going to be honest, when I'm doing it myself, I fill in and do a few computations as I'm filling in. So for me, I prefer to do this spot, and this spot as I'm filling in, which you don't have to. What we just did is definitely fine. But to save myself a step, I will do the opposite of B and just say it's -6 plus or minus. I will do the 6 squared as I'm filling it in. I don't touch the other stuff because this is too much to calculate at one time. There's too many signs going on. And then again, I always like to do double the A number, just say 2. So I like to start off at the second step, but if you prefer to slow down, you can start off at the first step. Now what happens is you're going to do this in a certain order. Common mistake is students want to divide the -6 and the 2, but you can't because you can't just divide part of a fraction. So first off, we're going to be working inside out. We're first going to do the radical, then simplify the radical, and then simplify the fraction in that order every time. So first off, I got to figure out what number goes under the radical. All right, now that part I would recommend just putting that in your calculator. So you could start off at the step before the one I just did and just do 6 squared like this minus 4 times A, which is 1, times our -16. Please do not put the radical over this value. If it's not a perfect square number, then you don't want it to have, oops, I did try to get it again. You don't want to have a decimal. So if it's not perfect square, then you cannot put the radical over it because you do not want to have the decimal. So first off, just put it in what's underneath. So it's 100. Okay, at this point, then if it's a nice perfect square number, which it is, now we will simplify it. Because if it was not a nice perfect square number, we would have to break it down like you learned last unit. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to simplify the radical. And that is a perfect square, so that will come out to be a 10. And just like the completing the square, if the numbers are all nice numbers, we are going to split it up and calculate what the actual number is. So recall that the plus and minus means that there are two options. I can either add 10 or subtract 10. All right, you can do this in your head or you can use your calculator. We have -6 plus 10 divided by 2. And there's our 2. And then we have to do this again with a minus. Now I can just bring it back up again and just change it to a minus sign. And there's my -8 answer. And if you look over to our factoring problem method, you will see that the answers do in fact match. Okay, so from here on out, I am going to do the problems by the quadratic formula method. Example number 2, I will tell you that that does factor. You may not have known that. But these are those trinomials that begin with 2, so you have to use the AC method. The quadratic formula, I don't have to worry about factoring. I just use the formula each and every time. All right, so I'm going to write down my A, B, C numbers. A is 2, B is -5, and C is -12 because it's in my equals 0 form. Writing my formula. Okay, so again, I will do it the slow way first. You're going to do the negative of the B number, which is -5 for the B number, plus and minus. Then you're going to do a -5 squared, in parentheses, don't forget with negatives, -4 times A is 2 times C is -12, all over 2 times the A number 2. I'll move it over a little bit. And if you want to do it that way, that's fine. Again, I like to actually do this and this step as I'm filling in, which you don't have to, but then that would look like this. It would look like positive 5, because that's the opposite of negative 5, plus or minus square root 25 minus 4 times 2 times negative 16, all over double the a would be 4. So again, if you want to skip directly to that, you can, or you can fill it in and then simplify. So I want to stress, in order to simplify this, it's working inside out of the radical. You first are going to do under the radical, then you're going to simplify the radical, and then you're going to simplify the fraction. All right, so first off, I have to know what's under the radical. So going to my calculator, I have to do the 25 minus 4 times 2 times negative 2 piece. All right, so I get a 153. Oh, I'm guessing this does not factor then. Oh, I'm sorry. I wrote my number wrong. It was supposed to be a 12 right here. I apologize. Let me go back. Okay, so it was a 12. Sorry about that. That should have been a 12. Okay, so doing that inside, I'm going to get 121. So 5 plus and minus the square root of 121 over 4. The next thing I have to do is simplify now the entire radical. And that can be simplified. That is actually a perfect square, and it's 11. If it comes out to be all nice whole numbers, I am going to split it apart. Otherwise, I don't have to. So I'm going to split it up. And all I have to do is figure out, excuse me, second case has got to be a minus. All I got to do is evaluate those two fractions, and then I will have my answers. So it's just a quick, it's a process you follow every single time. That's why some students prefer this. All right, 5 plus 11 all over 4. So I get 4 and negative 3 halves as my answers. And these will check out. All right, so these are getting nice answers. Now if we go to the back page, we'll do 3 more together. And keep in mind, using or reading text in the directions allows you to help yourself understand like what you're going to expect. In problem 3, you'll see that it says that you have to have your answers for x in simplest radical form. Once you see that, you automatically know that you will not have nice answers, which also indicates that you can't factor to solve this, because this will not be factorable. Factorable quadratic equations will always give you nice rational answers. All right, so for this one then, you can use the quadratic formula, or on a test, you would have the option to completing the square. We're going to do the formula for the next 3 problems. Here are our values for a, b, and c. Writing down the quadratic formula. Okay, and filling in my values. We're going to get x equals, and I'm going to do it the way I like now, which is to compute these 3 spots only when I'm filling in. And this is what that would look like. This means the opposite of b, so that's going to be a positive 4 plus or minus b squared will be negative 4 squared, which is 16. I don't want to mess around with the other 3. There's too much going on. And the bottom denominator is double the a number, which is 2. Okay, the next thing you're going to do is just work, again, inside out. So we're going to do under the radical, then we'll simplify the entire radical, and then we'll simplify the entire fraction. So it's going to be 4 plus or minus radical something over 2. All right, putting it in our calculators, we have the underneath part is 16 minus 4 times 1 times negative 8. And you get 48. Okay, and we expected a radical in our answer. Radical 48 does not come out completely. So now you're going to do however method you do to break down radicals. So if you do the tree method, it would look like this. And that means that you have 4 2s and a 3. Pair of 2s and a pair of 2 come out. So that's going to make that guy be a 4 radical 3. So then you replace radical 48 with a 4 radical 3. And then just like we did with rationalizing denominators, if you want to reduce a fraction that's kind of like this mess, you have to look at all 3 front numbers. They can all be divided by 2. So you're just going to divide 2 out and get 2 plus or minus 2 radical 3 over 1. We don't show a 1, so that would be our answer. And if the answers aren't pretty, we usually leave it in this format, although there are 2 answers there. So if you want to split it up, you can. But we technically, you always see the answers when they're like that, just written in the way I boxed it in. All right, so we'll try 2 more. The next problem, again, if you read the directions, it gives you a hint. You have the answers have to be in simplest a plus bi form. So therefore, you know you're not going to be able to factor that because you're going to have an ugly answer. Also, the I indicates that you're going to have a negative number under the radical for this problem. So that's a little bit ways to help you figure out like what type of answers you should get and which approach you should take. All right, so putting our values in. A is 1, B is 6, C is 10. Writing down our formula. Okay, filling in our numbers, and again, I'm going to fill in and do these 3 spots. And if you don't like this way, you don't have to do it this way. Okay, the opposite of B is negative 6. The B number squared is 36. I'm not touching this part. And then doubling the A number would be 2. All right, so now I'm going to work underneath the radical first. I got to figure out what the number is, and I know it's not going to be nice, and I also know it's going to be negative because of my direction. So if I don't get a negative number, I know that I computed something incorrectly. Okay, so underneath the radical is 36 minus 4 times 1 times 10. And I do get my negative number. It's a negative 4. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is simplify radical negative 4, which we learned last unit is a 2i. And then I'm going to simplify this fraction, and 2 can divide into both terms. And that's your final answer. Again, since it's not pretty, you may leave it in that form. You don't have to split it apart. And you can have a fraction left as an answer. There can still be a denominator left. We just haven't done a problem like that, but you could have one. We'll see what happens on problem number 5. Again, this one is not in standard form. So just remember, you have to always start off with standard form first, and then from there decide what you want to do. Factor it, use completing the square method, or the quadratic formula. So we're going to have to subtract the x over and add the 1 over. I'll restart that. Okay, so you get 5x squared, negative 6x, and negative x makes negative 7x, and then the plus 1. Okay, we always want to write it from highest to lowest power. Writing our numbers, a is 5, b is negative 7, and c is 1. Oh, and then before I begin, I didn't read the directions. The directions say that we're going to have our answer in simplest radical form. So we know it's not going to be pretty answers. We know we're going to have a radical, and it doesn't indicate i's, so we should get a positive number under the radical. All right, writing down my formula. Okay, next step, fill in. Opposite of the b number would be positive 7. The b number squared is 49. Remember, every squared number is positive, whether it's negative or positive to begin with. Minus 4 times the a number is 5 times the c number is 1, all over double the a number, which is 10. Okay, now I just have to figure out what number is under the radical, then simplify the radical and simplify the fraction. Okay, underneath the radical, 49 minus 4 times 5 times 1. And I get 29. Okay, 29. And radical 29 cannot be broken down. If radical 29 could be broken down, then we would break down radical 29 and then simplify the fraction like we did with rationalizing the denominator. So if I just give you a quick example, if you get an answer that looks like this, let's pretend you get an answer that looks like this after you break down the radical. The 6 and the 2 and the 4 can all be divided by 2. So then your final answer would look like 3 plus or minus radical 3 over 2. So that is possible that you can get answers that look like that. I'm sorry, in our notes we did not do one. But after you simplify the radical, if you can, you see if you can reduce if you can. Okay, and then you can use any method you want unless the test on the regions indicates a certain method. Otherwise, you can use factoring, completing the square, or quadratic formula.